It used to be simple. A man's value was visible. It stood next to him in family photos. It sat across from him at weddings. It carried his last name. If he was married, he was stable. If he had children, he was successful. If he wore a ring, he was respectable. And if he didn't, something must have gone wrong. That was the script. If you were single after 50, people didn't ask what you'd built. They asked what you'd lost. They didn't see independence. They saw failure. They didn't see choice. They saw rejection. They didn't see strength. They saw damage. But here's what has quietly changed. A growing number of men past midlife are not alone because they couldn't find someone. They're alone because they finally decided not to lose themselves again. This isn't loud. It's not political. It's not anti-woman. It's not anti-marriage. It's pro-peace. And that distinction matters. For decades, men were conditioned to believe that partnership was the ultimate validation, that the final proof of adulthood was commitment, that sacrifice was noble, compromise was mandatory, and endurance was masculinity. So we endured. We endured mismatched priorities. We endured emotional volatility. We endured financial strain. We endured subtle disrespect. We endured shrinking ourselves to preserve the illusion of harmony. We endured because we were told that's what strong men do. But strength without boundaries isn't strength. It's slow erosion. Somewhere between 45 and 60, a lot of men wake up and realize something uncomfortable. They've spent more time managing expectations than managing their own lives. And the cost of that realization is clarity. The world still whispers that the only meaningful ending is partnership, that the hero rides off with someone, not alone. But what if the hero rides off in peace? What if the real win isn't being chosen? It's choosing yourself. There's a difference between loneliness and sovereignty. Loneliness is feeling unseen. Sovereignty is being self-directed. Most men were never taught the difference. When a long-term relationship ends, whether through divorce, separation, or emotional collapse, people assume the man is broken, that he must be flailing, that he must be scrambling to replace what he lost. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes something else happens. Sometimes he exhales for the first time in years. Sometimes he sleeps through the night. Sometimes he realizes the silence isn't haunting, it's healing. Because what many men discover after 50 is that the heaviest part of a relationship isn't love. It's the structure. It's the constant negotiation, the merged schedules, the shared finances that become shared tension, the invisible performance of being on, even when exhausted, the quiet pressure to keep things smooth. You stop asking, what do I want? You start asking, what won't cause friction? You stop choosing. You start managing. And one day you look up and realize you haven't laughed freely in months. Not because you're miserable, because you're monitored. Not by surveillance, by expectation. Expectation of tone, expectation of timing, expectation of participation, expectation of agreement. That kind of constant calibration wears a man down. So when he chooses solitude, it's not rebellion, it's recovery. It looks like this: morning coffee that lasts as long as he wants, a house that stays in the order he prefers, music played without compromise, a Saturday that unfolds without negotiation, a decision made without committee approval. These aren't dramatic freedoms, they're foundational ones. And once a man tastes that level of autonomy again, it's hard to surrender it lightly. This is not about avoiding responsibility. It's about avoiding self-abandonment. For years, money inside marriage was presented as shared purpose. Joint accounts meant unity. Shared debt meant teamwork. Combined plans meant vision. But what many men learned is that shared finances often become shared obligations without shared control. Money at 50 is no longer about status, it's about time. Time to travel, time to rest, time to rebuild health, time to pursue long delayed interests, time to sit still without being accused of disengagement. Financial independence at midlife isn't greed, it's oxygen. It's the ability to decide where your energy goes. It's the power to say no without destabilizing someone else's world. It's the dignity of knowing that your retirement, your savings, your pension, if you have them, serve your peace first. And for many men who have been through divorce, the financial lessons are not theoretical. They've experienced asset division, legal fees, alimony, unexpected debt, retirement recalculations, plans rewritten. It's not bitterness, it's math. When you've rebuilt once, you calculate risk differently. That doesn't make love impossible, it makes surrender expensive. So instead of merging obligations again, many men choose clarity. They simplify, they downsize homes, they reduce expenses, they buy fewer status symbols and more experiences. They invest in their bodies, they invest in their time, they invest in friendships that don't require performance. From the outside, it may look selfish. From the inside, it feels balanced. Because what they've learned is this: independence is not measured by net worth, it's measured by how many of your decisions are truly yours. There's another layer people don't discuss enough. Divorce for men over 50 isn't just paperwork, it's identity disruption. You don't forget the night the conversation turned final. You don't forget the look in her eyes when she said she'd been unhappy for years. You don't forget the quiet that follows. And men often grieve differently. They don't always cry publicly. They don't always talk in groups. They don't always post about healing. They absorb it. They process it in silence. In therapy rooms, on long drives, in late night reflections, they replay the arguments, the miscommunications, the compromises, the moments they felt dismissed, the moments they felt inadequate, the moments they felt invisible. And eventually, they learn something critical. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Being alone is not the same as being unwanted. Being alone is not the same as being incomplete. They learn that loneliness inside a relationship is heavier than solitude outside one. That's a dangerous truth for cultural narratives, because it means partnership is not automatically superior to independence. It means quality matters more than form. Now, let's be clear: there are extraordinary marriages. There are partnerships built on mutual respect, emotional maturity, aligned values, and shared growth. But there are also relationships built on habit, fear, and inertia. And by 50, men can feel the difference in their nervous system. They feel it in their sleep. They feel it in their blood pressure. They feel it in their shoulders. They feel it in how much they talk or don't. Modern dating doesn't necessarily solve that problem. For many men in midlife, dating feels less like romance and more like a performance review. Profiles curated, photos filtered, expectations unspoken, boundaries unclear, language policed, intentions scrutinized. Be confident but not arrogant. Be traditional but not controlling. Be generous but not transactional. Be assertive but not aggressive. Be emotionally open but never messy. It becomes exhausting. Not because women are the problem, because the social dance has become complicated, and a man who values peace will not willingly enter chaos for novelty. So he opts out, not permanently, not angrily, strategically. He chooses depth over frequency. He chooses compatibility over chemistry. He chooses calm over intensity. And sometimes that means choosing himself. There's another myth worth dismantling, that men who live alone decline, that they fade, that without a partner they become unhealthy, disengaged, or unmotivated. For some, that's true, but for many others, the opposite happens. They reclaim physical discipline. They wake up earlier. They train consistently. They cook simply. They eat with intention. They schedule medical checkups because they want longevity, not because someone nags them. They rediscover strength for its own sake, not aesthetics, not validation. Function, strength that carries groceries without strain, strength that protects independence, strength that prevents dependence. They address mental health not to save a relationship, but to stabilize themselves. They go to therapy not to win arguments, but to understand patterns. They learn emotional vocabulary. They process resentment. They forgive without reconciling. They grieve without collapsing. They become less reactive, more grounded. That is not regression. That is evolution. But here's the critical warning: solitude must not become isolation. The modern world makes it easy to disappear. Work remote, order online, stream entertainment, scroll endlessly, avoid discomfort. A man can go days without meaningful human contact. That's not freedom, that's erosion. The men who thrive alone understand this. They build structure around connection. Weekly coffee with a friend, regular gym sessions where faces become familiar, volunteer commitments, community groups, skill-based classes, mentorship roles. They don't outsource all emotional needs to one partner. They diversify connection, and that protects them because the goal is not to avoid intimacy, it's to avoid dependency. Real masculinity in this chapter of life looks different than it did at 30. At 30, masculinity often looked like acquisition, career, assets, status, attention. At 50 and beyond, masculinity becomes refinement, boundaries, integrity, health, time stewardship, emotional control, selective vulnerability. It becomes less about proving and more about aligning. A man no longer needs applause. He needs coherence. His internal world must match his external life. And if a relationship enhances that coherence, he may choose it. But if it disrupts it, he will walk away without apology. Because he understands something younger men don't yet grasp. Time accelerates. The margin for error shrinks. Energy is finite. Peace becomes premium. So what we are witnessing is not male retreat. It is recalibration. A recalibration of value. A recalibration of risk. A recalibration of identity. By 2030, demographic projections indicate a continued rise in single-person households in the United States, including men over 50. This is not an anomaly. It is a structural shift. More men are asking, is the life I was told to want actually the life that fits me? Is partnership adding stability or subtracting clarity? Is compromise mutual or one-sided? Am I expanding or shrinking? These are not bitter questions. They are intelligent ones, and the answers vary. Some men will remarry. Some will date long-term without cohabitation. Some will remain single by design. Some will alternate between companionship and solitude. The key difference is this: choice, not default, not pressure, not fear. Choice. If you are a man over 50 listening to this and wondering whether you are behind because you are alone, consider this. Behind compared to what? An outdated standard? A cultural script written in a different economic era? A model built when life expectancy was shorter, gender roles were rigid, and community structures were different? You are not behind. You are navigating a different landscape. And the measure of success now is not whether someone shares your bed. It is whether you respect the man who wakes up in it. It is whether your health is trending upward, whether your finances are controlled, whether your relationships, romantic or not, are clean, whether your mornings feel heavy or hopeful, whether your evenings feel tense or calm. The quiet house is not a verdict. It is a canvas. You can waste it, or you can build something in it: a disciplined routine, a creative outlet, a business, a body that feels strong, a network of solid men, a legacy defined by contribution rather than compliance. Peace is not passive, it is constructed, and it requires courage. Because when you stop performing for external approval, you lose certain types of validation. But you gain alignment. You gain silence without anxiety. You gain decisions without guilt. You gain rest without permission. You gain direction without negotiation. This is not about rejecting women. It is about rejecting self abandonment. It is not about fear of commitment. It is about refusing unconscious sacrifice. It is not about bitterness. It is about boundaries. And boundaries are not walls, they are filters. If love enters your life and respects your structure, you may welcome it, but you will not dismantle your foundation to accommodate it. That is maturity. That is earned. That is what many men over 50 are finally embodying. So if you find yourself alone at this stage, don't rush to fill the silence. Interrogate it. What does it reveal? Are you restless because you miss chaos? Or because you haven't yet built purpose? Are you lonely because you lack a partner? Or because you lack mission? A partner can complement mission. They cannot replace it. A relationship can enhance identity. It cannot substitute for it. This chapter of life is not about proving you are still desirable. It is about proving you are still disciplined, still curious, still evolving, still accountable to your own standards, still capable of growth without external supervision. The world may still cling to the old image of success: the smiling couple, the grandkids, the anniversary photos. And those things can be beautiful, but they are not mandatory. What is mandatory is integrity. What is mandatory is health. What is mandatory is self-respect. You are not obligated to perform a version of adulthood that costs you your peace. You are not obligated to remarry to satisfy optics. You are not obligated to shrink so someone else feels secure. You are not obligated to repeat cycles because society is uncomfortable with solitary men. Your life is not a public relations campaign. It is a finite resource. Spend it carefully. Invest it deliberately. Protect it fiercely. And if companionship aligns with your structure, welcome it. But never again confuse attachment with achievement. Never again confuse sacrifice with virtue when it's one-sided. Never again confuse silence inside a relationship with stability. Because stability is internal, it is not co-signed. The man who chooses his life consciously, partnered or single, is ahead. The man who rebuilds after loss and does not harden, but sharpens, is ahead. The man who replaces resentment with boundaries is ahead. The man who values time more than approval is ahead. If that is you, you are not late. You are precise. And in this stage of life, precision is power.